evening, colleagues. My name is Thabang Sogolela, and I'm a manager in the unit of CPD and registration. In the unit of CPD and registration in the office of the South African Pharmacy Council. And I just want to take this opportunity to welcome you all to this workshop. This is the third and the last workshop for Intern CPD workshop for 2022, and we really appreciate your presence. I'm with colleagues from the office, Mr. Mokwadi Mohanu, who is the Senior Manager for CPD and Registrations Unit. And we're also having the team from Communications, and they will be giving us support in ensuring that we are all connected, and they are also responsible for the streaming of the event on Teams, on the SAPC Facebook page and the SAPC YouTube channel. So yeah, let's all feel free. And then please note that our workshop is divided into two sections. The first section is on general requirements and conditions for internship, and it will be facilitated by the Office of Council. And the second section will be on CPD evaluation, and it will be facilitated by the representatives of the assessors and moderators of CPD entries. So today, the representatives that are with us here for assessors and moderators, we're having Prof. Butler and Ms. Adele. So they are the ones who will be taking you through the second part of the presentation. And please note that there is a welcome message on the screen, and you are kindly requested to go through it. And what I want to highlight from the message is that there will be a survey questionnaire that you are kindly requested to complete, since it will be used for attendance and rating of the workshop. So even if you don't want to answer the questions, please complete the part wherein you just provide your personal information, since we're gonna use that for the purpose of attendance. And with these few words, I just want to say you are welcomed, and please stay with us until the end of the workshop so that you don't miss anything. And we really appreciate your participation will be highly appreciated. Thank you. Okay, now I'll be taking you through the first presentation. So let me open my slides so that we can get started. Okay, so we'll start with the program for the day. So the first thing was the welcome message, welcome, which is what I've just done. And then now we will be going to the second part, that is the introduction to pre-registration. And it will be from 5:06 to 25 to 7. It will be followed by the pre-registration evaluation for CPD portfolio. And then at 7:30, we will take a 10-minute short break. From there, we will continue with the pre-registration evaluation for CPD portfolio. And then at 10 to 9, we will open for questions and answers, and then we will close. So that's how our workshop will run. I'm sorry, after the first part, we're going to have, you will be given an opportunity to ask questions before we start with the pre-registration evaluation. So introduction to pre-reg, when I'm done with the presentation, you will be given an opportunity to ask questions. And then this is the outline of our presentation. It will address the legal framework, evaluation, and then we will take you through the SAPC website. And then we will also give you information on CSP registration and on how to contact SAPC. And then this is we move into our first slide on the legal framework for pre-registration. So what is important to note here is that interns are expected to register with the South African Pharmacy Council on completion of their BPharm degree, because that is the minimum requirement before they can commence with their internship. And all we need, all that council needs for you to be registered, is for you to have an approved pharmacy that you will be practicing in, and you must also provide a contract with an approved tutor, and also pay the prescribed fee. Once those documents are submitted to council, then you'll be able to be registered as an intern. And please note that internship is, it takes a period of 12 months minimum. So anything less than 12 months, you won't be released from being an intern. So make sure that you complete the required 12 months under training. And then the other important thing is the scope of practice of pharmacist interns. Please note that your scope of practice is exactly the same as the one for pharmacists. The only difference here is that you're functioning under supervision of an approved tutor. But everything that a pharmacist is doing, that's exactly what you are expected to do. And then interns who are in manufacturing and academia are expected to complete 400 hours of supervised practice in approved community or hospital pharmacy. So for this to happen, it's important for interns to note that there's no need for them to look for another tutor. The tutor that they are with, either in the manufacturing company or in the university, that will still remain their tutor. All they need to do is to arrange with one of these institutions on time, and then they provide, they go for the 400 hours, and then period of at least 5 days, which should be consecutive days, and records of such exposure should be kept. And the supervising pharmacist should submit a progress report online. So those are the requirements that you need to take note of. And then still on the legal framework for pre-registration, a cessation of contract is allowed in case the intern, for some reasons, can't continue with the registered tutor. You are allowed to terminate that contract. And all that is needed is for you to submit an online application and then a contract with a new approved tutor. And that should be done 7 days prior to the session date for council to approve your request. And there is also a fee that needs to be paid as well. So once if everything is provided, the Office of the Registrar will be able to process your application. And it's always important to note that session will be approved only once the new premises and tutor are approved by council. And then this is the pre-registration evaluation. As interns, like I said, internship takes a period of 365 days under a supervised practice, which is 1 year minimum. And during that year, you will be expected to sit for the pre-registration examination. You will also be expected to submit CPD activities, and there are progress reports that your tutors are expected to complete. So we'll discuss the three in more details as we continue. And then with the exam, please note that it is an online open book examination, and it will be made up of two sections, that is the general questions and the calculations. And for you to pass, you need to obtain at least 50% from the general questions and 60% from the calculations. And then with regard to the CPD entries, please note that competency standard 5.3 under domain 5, competency standard 5.3 is compulsory, meaning all interns under domain 5 are expected to do 5.3. And then again, it's important to note that the results are released 1 month from submission deadlines, and the results for entries that were submitted after the deadlines will be released 1 month later with the subsequent submission deadlines. And all CPD entries that were assessed not yet successful should be resubmitted as well in line with the deadlines. So the deadlines are provided in your manuals. It's important to take note of them, because that is what will guide you as you are submitting the CPD entries. And then interns who are at institutional or community pharmacies, they are expected to submit 7 progress reports, and then those in manufacturing, they are expected to submit 9. And then the academia, they are expected to submit 3 progress reports and the declaration of 400 hours, which should also be submitted by interns in the manufacturing sector. And then for those in academia, they are also expected to submit achievement of master's degree qualification and the favorable progress report before they can be released or for community service. So if any of those ones is missing for the interns in academia, unfortunately they cannot start with the community service. No, I'm sorry. Okay, now let's look for the process you are to follow when applying for community service. Interns are to apply online for community service, and there is the address that you will be using for applying. And then ICSP considers the pre-registration examination and CPD results when placing interns for community service. So this simply means that when the Department of Health is placing interns for community service, they take into consideration the fact that whether you have passed the exam or not, and whether you are competent in CPDs. If you are not yet successful with the exam, or you haven't met the CPD requirements, unfortunately you won't be placed for community service. So just take note of that as you will be busy with your internship, so that you don't get surprised when you are not placed or your placement is delayed. And then these are the CPD submission deadlines. Please take note of them. They are there in your manual as well. And for now, the next submission deadline is on the 1st of April 2022, meaning anything that is going to be submitted after the 1st of April, the result will be released on the 30th of May. So if you want your results to be available by the 25th of April 2022, make sure that you submit on time by the 1st of April 2022. So you'll just familiarize yourself with all the dates that are provided there. And it's important to note that according to council policy, appeals must be submitted within 1 calendar month after the release of results, and there will be no CPD assessment in December. So all entries that are submitted after the 28th October 2022 will be assessed in January 2023. So this one is very important, colleagues. Please make sure that you take note of it. And then entries submitted after the deadline will be assessed and released on the next subsequent submission deadline. I think that's the example I was giving you there when I was saying if you submit after the 1st of April, your results will be available on the 30th of May. And when CPD entries are released, wait at least 48 hours for the system to upload. So sometimes there are delays. So just give yourself some time, and after 48 hours, if you're not receiving anything, you can contact the office. And then please note that on submission of the 10th and subsequent CPDs, a fee determined by council will be charged, and the fee is published on the council website. So you can check that fee from the website. And then we have introduced what we call CPD feedback session. These sessions will be taking place on the 7th and the 8th of June 2022, and they are targeting interns who are struggling with the CPDs. The purpose of these sessions is just to respond to intern CPD queries and to share assessment experience and to guide interns on how to improve the quality of their CPD entries. And then the examination dates for 2022 are indicated there, which are also there in your manual. You can refer to the manual, but it is important for you to note that all exam bookings must be done online before the closing date. Late booking fee will be charged after the closing date until 14 days before the exam. So please take note of that message, it's very much important. And then there is a possibility of the exam dates to change, but in case there are changes, that will be communicated to you in time. And also note that it is compulsory for all interns to participate in the practice examination before they attempt the pre-registration examination. So in fact, if you didn't participate in the in the practice examination, unfortunately, you won't be allowed to sit for the pre-registration examination. So make sure that you book for the practice exam that will be coming on the 2nd of June so that you can be able to sit for the pre-registration examination that will be taking place on the 5th and the 6th of August. And then the examination entrance requirements. So the requirements, they differ, and interns who have been registered for 6 months, I mean, that is the minimum period that is required for you to sit for an examination. So interns in their 6 months of internship, they can only sit for the examination provided that they have submitted at least 6 CPD entries online, and they must be competent in at least 3 entries. And they should have completed the practice examination. That is what I've just mentioned. And also the tutor must have submitted 3 progress reports. And then interns who are registered for 9 months or more, they must be competent in all CPD entries and completed the practice examination. So if you are in your 9th month of internship, the requirement differs from the ones in their 6 months in the sense that here you must be successful in all 6 CPD entries. And again, the tutor should have submitted the 4 progress reports. And then interns who will be reattempting the examination, maybe those who didn't make it first time, it's important to note that they must, before they can sit for the exam, they must be successful in all 6 CPD entries. And also they must have submitted the relevant progress report according to the manual. And No exam fee for the first and second attempt. Fee will be charged on the third and subsequent attempt. And please note that tutors will have access to intern overall results. So your tutors will be knowing how you are progressing. So don't be surprised by that. And then the decisions of council, this is exactly what I was explaining in the previous slides. You will just go through it since the presentation will be available for you. Now let's look at the SAPC website. That is where you will be the site that you will be using for almost everything during your internship year. And then when you are on the pharmacist intern page, you are able to access the manual. I believe you have seen that. So the red tab there, once you click on it, and then you see the blue click here. Once you click there, then you will be able to access the 2022 intern tutor manual. And then when you go to the secured site, you're gonna click the login there, then it will take you to the secured site, wherein you will be able to put in your details, and you will be able to access the secured site. Okay. And then there is also the intern CPD user manual, which you will access it by clicking under here on the last line there. When you click here, you will also be able to access the intern CPD user manual. Okay, and then this is the dashboard page that you will see when you're logging in. And then, so depending on what you're doing, when you're doing your annual declaration, you will select the annual declaration. When you're doing the CPD, you will go to CPD, but it's important for you to note that you can't open the CPD page until you have done the annual declaration. So that is the first thing that you are expected to do. Once you have declared yourself as practicing, then you will be able to access other menu there, items there. And then, yes, the CPD, that's where you will be doing your CPDs there, that's your manuals, and then that's where you will, view your progress. And then the last one is when you want to log out. And then here, in case you need other things, you are able to choose the relevant tab. Let's say you want to book for the pre-registration examination, you will click under the pre-registration examination, and then it will take you to the relevant page. So here, that's what you will see after you have clicked the annual declaration. Then you will just click where it says go to annual declaration so that you can declare yourself. And then once that is done, this is how the page will look like. And then you just go to new declaration. And then once these are the three steps that you are expected to complete. The first one, it will be on employment, and then the domain competencies, and then the assessment criteria. So once you're done with all the three, then you will be done with your declaration, and then the system will tell you that according to your competencies, you are a practicing pharmacist. Then it means you are ready to go. You will agree. And then if it can say you are not a practicing pharmacist, it means you were under the competencies, you were saying you don't do all of them. Then in that case, it will say you are not practicing. Then if it's like that, you disagree, it will take you back so that you can select correctly. And then once you're done with your annual declaration, then you are able to access the CPD. And then the CPD is made up of 4 steps, which is the reflection, the planning, implementation, and the evaluation or reflection on learning. So these are the 4 CPD cycle steps that you are expected to complete for each CPD entry that you will be submitting. And what is important is that you need to be aware that there are 6 domains that you will be choosing one competency from each, and each of the competencies that you're choosing, then it will go through the 4 steps of CPD cycle. Then once you have done that, is then that you'll be able to submit. And then under domain 5, that is professional and personal practice, please note that there is only one CPD that you will be doing, since it's compulsory for all the interns. And then this is the CPD cycle. The first step is reflection. Under reflection, you're just identifying a new learning need. And then from there, you will type your learning need there. Once you're done, it will take you to the next step. That is planning, implementation, and evaluation. And then once you have submitted, you have completed all the steps, then there is a red tab there which says submit for verification. So that's where you will click for your entry to go to your tutor for verification. So the system will tell you that reflection is complete, the planning is complete, implementation is complete, and evaluation is complete. In case you didn't complete any of the 4 steps, then you won't be able to submit. The system won't allow you until all your 4 CPD cycle steps are completed. And then when the CPD results are released, there is a red tab there that is report under submit for verification. This is where you will be able to view the assessment report, whether you made it or not. The comments for the assessors will be there. And then, so these are the steps that we were talking about, this 4 CPD steps that you need to follow before you can submit your entry. And then, okay, let's move to the next one. And then when you are to book for the pre-registration examination, on the dashboard page, you're gonna click on the tab for pre-registration examination. Or in case we're booking for a workshop, you will use the workshop tab. And then in case of the examination booking, you will indicate whether you're booking for the examination or you're booking for the practice examination. And this is also where you will be able to view your examination results under examination result tab. Okay. And then the progress reports. So there are progress reports, like are indicated how many reports must be submitted by interns in different sectors. So the progress reports are based on different number of weeks, which are expected to be completed by your tutors and be submitted to us. Since they are also part of the requirements for pre-registration. And then so you can also be able to view your progress under my progress, and then whether you have submitted all the progress reports, the number of practical training days, have you met the required 365 days, or are you still behind? And then you can also view your outcomes for the pre-registration examination there. And under CPD, you can also see how many CPDs you submitted, how many are successful, how many are not successful. So it's also important to visit my progress, because it will give you information on how you are progressing. And then important information to note is that there is an annual fee for interns, which is payable by the 1st of June each year, and it is 616. Please make sure that you don't miss this date, because if you don't pay, then the council will take some steps. And then it's also important to note that interns internship must be completed within 12 months. And in most cases, the employment contract is only for 12 months. So if you are unable to complete for 12 months, then you will have to find an internship place in case the current employer cannot continue with you. And in that case, it means you need to inform the office, wherein you will sign a new contract with the new tutor and submit that information to the Office of Council. And the intern progress is made available to the interns, to the employer, to the tutor, and the National Department of Health. So the National Department of Health is coming in, like I said, for them to place you for community service. They need to know how you performed in internship. Okay, and then these are some of the things that are delaying the release from internship, which include submitting CPD entries after the October submission deadline, non-compliance to 6 of the 6 CPD entries, failing the pre-registration examination, and incomplete progress reports, as well as not completing the required 365 practical training days. And it's important to make sure that you submit your CPD entries on time to avoid disappointment. And this here, we're just sharing some of the communications we're receiving from interns, wherein they're negotiating the marking of the CPDs to be fast-tracked. And unfortunately, we don't work like that. We're working with deadlines, just the same way we're telling you that the deadline for submission is the 1st of April. The assessors are also having deadline for assessment. The moderators are also having deadlines for moderation. The office also has deadline for the release of results. So unfortunately, the office won't be able to cater for special requests like these ones that are displayed here. So just make sure that you observe the dates as they are in your manual. And then we have seen some act of unprofessional conduct, which we want to share with you so that you are aware that they are not, allowed. So do not contact the assessor or moderator to pressurize them to mark CPD entries. Like I said, we're working with deadlines. And then do not threaten the assessor or moderator for marking of CPD entries. And unprofessional behavior will result in disciplinary actions being taken against the intern. So please note that it's very much important. And then when you want to contact the Office of South African Pharmacy Council, there is the email address that you can use. And please note that the office operates from 8 to 4:30. And then the contact center is also reachable from 9 to 4 o'clock every day. We don't work over the weekends. And then that is the customer care line, the first email, and the email address you can use. And then you can also submit your request or your queries online. That it can be done on the website, where in case you're having a query with CPD, you will select CPD, and then you give us your details and you write your comment there. The office will be able to access that and respond to your query within the acceptable period of time. And then this brings us to the end of my presentation. And I think now we can go for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Tabang. There's a question from Rashil Daja. Is there a limit to how many CPD entries there can be submitted for each deadline?
Okay, thank you, Natalie. There's no limit. If you can submit 2, you can. If you're submitting 6 of them, you can. There's no limit in that regard. Thank you.
This question is from Anonymous. When I log in, there is no annual declaration tab. It just says dashboard and CPD directly under it. It also does not allow me to open the CPD tab.
Okay, I don't know what might be the problem then, but the intern maybe can just submit a query online, and then we will be able to contact her and assist him or her. Thank you.
Thanks, Tabang. Those are the only questions we've received so far, unless my colleagues have anything on social media.
I think Newa is saying there's nothing from YouTube. And I'm not sure.
Okay, there's a question here. After I logged into my account, when I click on the CPD option in order to do the annual declaration, it says invalid. Credentials supplied are invalid. Please try to log in again. Object reference not set to an instance of an object.
Okay, thanks, Natalie. I think even this one, maybe he or she can just submit a query online, and then we will be able to assist him or her.
Thanks, Tabang. If I can just add on to that, if they could please submit a screenshot so that we can have our technicians look into it. Then we have a question from Facebook. Christopher Olivan asks, good evening. Can you please confirm if we submit a CPD on the 1st of April, will the results be released on the 25th of April or the 30th of May?
Okay, thanks, Natalie. The 1st of April is the deadline, meaning that's the last day on which they must submit for their results to be released on the 25th of April. So anything submitted from now until the 1st of April, the results will be released on the 25th of April. Anything submitted from the 2nd of April, the results will only be released on the 30th of May. Yeah, that's how it works. So for the 1st of April, the results will be released on the 25th of April. Thank you.
Thanks, Tabang. That looks like all the questions we have for now. I'm leaving the question and answer section open, so if interns have more questions, they can continue to post them, and then we'll answer them during our second question and answer section later.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I will. Yes, I will then hand over to the next presenter. Thank you.
Hi, Tabang. Thank you very much for your presentation, and welcome from me, Adele Nadia, and Prof. Nadine Butler. We will be taking you through the next presentation, and we will be looking at the CPD submission itself and all the processes you have to go through to complete your CPDs. So we're just waiting for the presentation to come up, and then we will start with this.
Is my screen being shared?
No, Prof, not at the moment.
Oh, I've requested control. I've pressed share. You didn't get control. Your request for control was not accepted. Okay.
Okay, Prof, you should be able to share now.
I've tried. And now?
No, Prof.
It's still telling me I don't have control. And now?
No, Prof.
Adele, may you please assist by sharing from your side? Thank you.
I'm sharing as much as I can here, but I don't know why it's not coming through.
Okay, Adele's screen is coming through now. Adele, if you can just go into presentation slideshow mode.
Okay, just a moment. It's just giving me.
There we go.
Are you seeing my screen, Natalie?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. We will start with the presentation for the CPDs. And as I said, Prof. Butler and myself will be taking you through the presentation to tell you a little bit more about the CPDs and what you can expect when completing your CPDs. So first of all, the outline for the presentation. I will be doing the first part and Prof. Butler will be taking you through the examples. So please make use of the question section to have all your questions answered so that we can assist you tonight. So first of all, we're going to look at the competency standards. We're going to have a look at the CPD cycle itself. We're going to talk a little bit about assessment, professionalism, confidentiality. We will be looking at some difficult competency standards or where you should be more selective. And we will also look at the role of your tutor. So that's just a short outline of what we will be looking at tonight. So first of all, and as Tabang mentioned, it's very important to go to Pharmacy Council's website and find the 2022 Intern Manual. It's a very important document as you've seen all the deadlines, all the dates, what is expected of you, you can find in your manual. So it's very important for you and your tutor to have a look at the manual and find all the information that you will need for your internship. We will be talking about important documents within the manual for your CPDs. And the first one will be the criteria for assessment, and you can find that on page 33. We will have a look at the checklist from page 38, and then the competency standards. And you will see there's a lot of new terminology, so hopefully you have seen some of them, but we will be providing an overview as well. And then you must also remember your tutor is a very valuable resource for you to complete your CPDs because they have a lot of experience and they have been doing this for a long time. And you should not forget the Pharmacy Council website as a very important resource for you for your CPDs. So first of all, the competency framework. You can find the competency framework on page 52. And if we look at the competency framework, it was developed especially for the South African environment. And you will be completing your CPDs within this competency framework. So hopefully you have gone through the manual and you have familiarized yourself with the competency framework, and you can find that in the manual in Annexure B, as we have stated. So some other terminologies, and Tabang has touched on them as well, and you can find them in your manual. The first one is a domain, and as you've seen in the previous presentation, there are 6 domains. Then we have our competency standards, and we have our behavioral statements. And we will be talking a lot about them this evening. And as we go on with the presentation, you will see that in each domain, you have to do 1 CPD. You have to select a competency standard from each domain, and then we have the behavioral statements, which are the very important ones for which you will have to provide evidence to show us as assessors and moderators and counsel that you are able to do this or that your behavior has changed. But we will get to that as we go on with the presentation. So first of all, Tabang has touched on this. We have 6 domains, and as a pharmacist, all of us work within these 6 domains. So in whichever sector you are, some may be a little bit more, some may be a little bit less, but you are functioning within these 6 domains as a practicing pharmacist. And as an intern, as we mentioned, you will have to do a CPD in each of these domains. As we stated, domains are organized into competencies and clusters of competencies, and there you will have to select one of them. So if we look at the framework, we have a nice figure here. You can see we have a domain at the top. Then each domain has a cluster of competency standards where we have that beneath. And then we have the behavioral statements. So if you had a look in your manual, you would have seen this. So for example, if we look at domain 1 has 6 competency standards. So for number 1.1 is promotion of health and wellness. 1.2 is medicine information, and then it goes up to 1.6. And if you look at the behavioral statements, you will see that 1.1 has A, B, C, and D, as do 1.2, but the number of behavioral statements you can find under each competency standard varies. So they are between 1, some of them have 9. So we will be talking about the behavioral statements as well, because they are very important for you as well, because that is what you have to provide evidence for ultimately in your CPD. So the competency standards, so let's just have a quick look how they are structured. Each competency standard is part of a domain. Then there's a section, does this apply to me? There's an introduction to the domain, the competencies, the behavioral statements. Then we have the entry level, the intermediate, the advanced, and we have a tick box section. So if we talk about entry level, that will be applicable to our interns, and that is if you have been working for less than 3 years. If we go to the intermediate, if you've been a pharmacist for less than 7 years, and your advanced practice is you've been a pharmacist for more than 7 years. So if we look again, the behavioral statements, which are in the middle, and as I said, they are very important because that's what you have to be able to do, but that will become clear as we go on to this. So the entry level is for our interns, the advanced practice comes much later. So for example, if you have a look at this, we've copied in competency standard 2.6, that's pharmacist initiated therapy. And if you look under that, you can find your behavioral statements. So I hope the terminology is clear to you, because we will be talking about these terminology when we use them within the presentation. So as we've stated, you can see the structure of a competency standard. We have the domain at the top. This one is domain 1, public health. And you can see, does this domain apply to me? You can read about the domain. It applies to all pharmacists whose practice include promotion of health and wellness. There's an introduction section. We have all our competencies, and we have our behavioral statements, in this case, for 1.1. So you can go through your manual and you can find all of the domains with all of these competency standards and have a look at the behavioral statements. So we always get questions from interns or even pharmacists, and they ask us, why CPD? Why do we have to do CPDs? Now, as you know, pharmacy is a very dynamic profession, and it's ever changing, and there's always new developments, and there's always new medication or something new that is happening within our profession. And that is why it's so important for us as pharmacists and then pharmacist interns to stay up to date and to stay relevant with our knowledge to serve the public. So a CPD, you can see it's a cycle. It happens in a cycle. So something happens in our pharmacy and we realize that there's something that we do not know. So it's a process by which we as registered persons maintain and enhance our competencies throughout our professional career. As you know, pharmacists also have to complete 6 CPDs. So you can now get into the cycle and start preparing for submitting your 6 CPDs yearly and staying up to date and being a lifelong learner. So this encompasses a range of activities, and it's continuing education, it's supplementary training, anything that you learn that is new is continuing professional development. And CPD enables us as registered persons to develop in our area of practice and to demonstrate that we are competent in what we are doing. So as you can see, CPDs are very important, and it's important for us to provide evidence that we have done CPD and that we are lifelong learners. So now we're going to look at the CPD cycle. So this is where we are going to start looking at the CPD. And as Tabang stated, there are 4 steps in the CPD cycle. So the first one is reflection. Then we have our planning, our implementation, and our evaluation. So we will be looking at all of these separately to explain the CPD cycle to you clearly so that you understand what is required of you in each section or each phase of the CPD. It's very important that you have to complete all 4 of these steps for every CPD that you submit. So if you select 1.1, you will do all 4. If you select 2.6, you will do all of this. So you will have 6 separate submissions where you have done the complete CPD cycle and submitted your evidence. So the first step we're going to look at is our reflection. So as we stated, something happened to you that you realized there's something I do not know, or there's something that I need to learn, or that I have to find out. So that is reflection. Something happens in the pharmacy and you think, oh, I don't know. And that is a CPD. So what do I need to know and what do I need to learn? So first of all, we have to decide on an appropriate learning title for this activity. And now you must remember the assessor and the moderator from council is not in the pharmacy with you. So you have to provide the context. By reading this title, the assessor and the moderator should know exactly what you are going to do and what you want to learn. So it should be relevant to what you want to learn. Please don't copy the wording of the competency standard or a behavioral statement just as it is in the manual. Provide your own unique descriptive title so that the assessor and the moderator know what this activity is all about. The other day I told the intern, if your topic is hypertension, it can be anything, but if your title is providing information on healthy lifestyle for hypertensive patients, for example, it's much more clear, or you know what I plan to do. So if you think about your title, make it unique and make it your own. So for the reflection, ask yourself, what do I need to learn? How do I know that this is what I need to learn? And what will I do with what I have learned? So there again, provide some context for the assessor. Tell them this is what happened in the pharmacy or wherever you are, the sector where you are, and I realized that I do not know this. And what will you do with this knowledge once you know this? So once I've learned this, I would like to be able to promote health and wellness, or whatever the domain is that you selected, or the competency standard. Make sure that it clearly aligns with the outcome that you have selected. So describe the learning need, make it personal, use I need to know this, I need to learn this, I wasn't sure, or what the case may be. Be careful not to describe what the patient didn't know. So say, for example, a patient comes into the pharmacy and they ask you, they have asthma, and what medication, what cough medicine can they use? Your learning need will not be the patient didn't know. The patient asked you and you didn't know, or you didn't know what the appropriate advice is. So it is what the patient request was, but you have to describe what you need to learn. So the learning need must be your own, and it must be related to the outcome that you have selected. So this will determine the choice of the competency standard and the behavioral statements. So if something happens in the pharmacy and you know, okay, this is something that I didn't know that I need to learn, then you will go to your manual and you will find an appropriate competency standard and look at the behavioral statements to see if it is applicable to what you need to learn. If you look in the manual, there's a very useful checklist for you, and you can use this to evaluate your own CPD. We will have a look at the other checklist as well, so you can see, is there a title? Yes or no? Is the title short, specific, and related to the competency standard? So if you use this to evaluate your CPD before you submit it to your tutor for verification, it's very likely that your CPD will be successful. So look at the reflection as well. Have I clearly stated what I need to learn and know? Have I stated my learning need in the first person? Have I identified a learning need for myself? And have I made sure not to include my planning or my implementation here? So it's very important that the reflection should just identify the learning need and what you hope to achieve by addressing this learning need. So now that we know what we want to learn, so we have identified the need and we know there's something that we need to learn. The next step is we're going to plan how we are going to learn this, or how are we going to achieve this learning need, and that is planning. So planning is how can I learn this, and you can use the behavioral statements to guide your planning. So look at the behavioral statements, that's the A, B, C, and D under the competency standard, and you will have a look there, and that will guide you. If the behavioral statement talks about legislation, then you know, okay, I'll have to go and consult the legislation. If the behavioral statement talks about for example, compounding, then you know you'll have to find something about compounding, the minimum standards, or pharmacist-initiated therapy. There you already know, okay, maybe I should include something from the GPP. So use the behavioral statements to guide your planning and to tell the assessor how you are going to achieve this. So for the planning, how exactly am I going to learn this, and what are my options? So here you should not only describe what you are going to do, but also how are you going to do this, and why are you going to do this, and when are you going to do this? So for example, you are planning a presentation, you will state, I am going to do this in this setting. When are you going to do this? What you are going to do? And there, as we said, refer to the behavioral statements to structure your planning. Mention the relevant sources that you are going to use, and make sure that you are specific. Don't say, I'm going to consult the GPP. You will not read the whole GPP for a specific activities that you are doing. If you are going to do pharmacist-initiated therapy, you will refer to the section in the GPP that relates to pharmacist-initiated therapy. So make your planning very specific. Tell us why you are going to look at the GPP, why are you going to look at the GPP, and what are you going to do with this? What evidence can I support to support my learning? And the planning again, then should be in the future tense. I am going to do this. I am planning to consult the Pharmacy Council website, or whatever you decide would be the most relevant resource. And as I said, if you're going to use any legislation, tell us which section of the Act are you going to use, which section of the Pharmacy Act or the Medicines Act or the GPP or any other reference, and why have you decided to use that specific reference. So provide a rationale for your planning. Why am I going to do it in this specific way? Again, we have a checklist, so please consult your manual. We have a grid and a checklist for you to evaluate your own submission to make sure that everything is there. I have clearly stated how I'm going to do this. I've identified the resources. I explained how I will be using those resources. I've made sure not just to write what I intend to do. And you have written this in future tense. So you can see your planning, you have a need, and this is just how am I going to achieve this? What am I going to do? So the third step in the cycle is our implementation, and this is then what have you done? So you had a learning need, you planned, and now you are showing us how you actually did this, how you achieved your learning need. So the implementation is what you actually did. Here you will provide us the context, the what, the where, the when, the how. It is very important that you link it to your evidence, and remember to include all the behavioral statements for the chosen outcome. And remember, now we have already done this. So this would be in the past tense. I did this. I did that. I made a presentation. I made a handout. Whatever you did, you have already done this. So this will be in the past tense. It's very important that your implementation should link to the evidence, and it should link to the behavioral statements. It might sound confusing, and we will get to that to show you why it is so important to link everything, because that is what gives it the context to show the assessor and the moderator that you are actually able to do this. So, and we will get to annotation as well, but we need to link everything together, and your evidence is critical as part of your implementation, and it should be linked. So you can see implementation. I have described exactly what I did. I've included the where, the when, the what, the how. I've written in past tense. I've referred to labels in my evidence. So you've linked it to the behavioral statements, and you have checked that it matched the learning need, and you have addressed all the behavioral statements for the competency standard. So the implementation must be supported by evidence. So what we mean there is, if you state that you have done something, you have to provide proof. You have to provide some evidence to show us that you have done this, that you are able to do this. For example, if you have a part of the GPP, to show us how you use the GPP and link it to your evidence. So here you will see, and as we continue, you will see that it's important to show us that your behavior has changed, that you are now able to do this. And that's why the linking to the evidence is so important. So for the evidence, I've checked that I have sufficient evidence, and we will talk about the compliance for evidence, or the guidelines for evidence again. I have annotated my evidence. We will get to annotation as well. I have annotated my evidence with the behavioral statements. My evidence is clear and readable. It's not upside down. And I have made sure all the patient identifying details have been hidden. I cannot stress patient confidentiality enough. Please make sure if you submit any pharmacy documents or anything, a lot of interns, they submit a printout, trailer labels, Schedule 6 registers, and then they forget about the name on the trailer label, or they forget the name on the bottom part of the patient printout. So make sure that patient names and ID numbers are not visible. It's very important to make sure how you hide the information. There's a lot of whiteboard markers that tend to fade when it's scanned in, so make sure that the information is really not visible, as you will not be successful if you breach patient confidentiality. So evidence we will talk about more so a bit later. So let's go and have a look at evaluation. So the evaluation stage, this is our last step. So in this last step, we're going to explain what we have learned, how have we applied our learning, and then you will see there are some additional information that you have to supply. And the focus here is what you have learned related to the evidence, the application, how have you subsequently applied your knowledge, the impact, how has it changed your practice, and you should identify a new future learning need. So that is the last part, and that is the evaluation. So for example, say you did an activity where a patient came into the pharmacy and they wanted something for, as we stated, the asthma patient that wants something for cough. And while doing this, you realized how important it is to ask the correct questions when doing OTC or when supplying OTC medication. So that can be an application. You now realized how important it is, and when a patient came in with something else, you knew how to ask the correct questions. So we want to know what you have learned, how you have applied it, what the impact was on your learning, and the future learning needs. Something else you want to learn, but remember it should still be aligned with the competency standard that you have selected. You have to provide an example to substantiate this, but remember the evidence goes with the implementation, so you do not provide evidence for the evaluation section. Again, we have a checklist, so you can go through this and you can clearly see if you evaluate your own submission and be really critical about your submission, it is possible to pass all your CPDs if you just answer all the questions and make sure that you have addressed all the issues that should be addressed. So there we have the complete CPD cycle, all 4 steps, and it's important to remember that each phase of the cycle should be completed for every CPD. So if you do CPD 1.1, as we stated, you're going to do a reflection, planning, implementation with your evidence, and evaluation for 1.1. If you select, say, for example, 2.6, you're going to do reflection, planning, implementation with evidence and evaluation for 2.6. So you will have 6 CPD cycles, 1 within each domain. So as you see, CPD is a stepwise approach. And you will see the first step that we have identified here is to select a domain. But if you now think about what we have been saying, first of all, as Tabang said, you first have to do your annual declaration, otherwise you will not have access to the CPD tab. Something happens in the pharmacy and you realize that this is a learning need. So once that happens, you can go to your manual and you can select the appropriate domain for this specific learning need. Once you have found the correct domain, read the competency standards and find the appropriate one for your practice area. Read the behavioral statements, and if they are applicable and you will be able to provide evidence for all of them, you know that is the CPD that you want to complete. Then you start the cycle, you enter it onto Council's website, and you submit it online for tutor verification. It's very important, and as the bank stated, the next deadline is the 1st of April. That is Friday, and then the 6th of May. You cannot submit your CPD on the 1st of April at 5 to 12 at night. Your tutor still has to verify. So it's very important for you to talk to your tutors. Tell them what you plan. Tell them when you plan to submit. Remember, once you submit, it's not yet submitted. Your tutor has to verify the CPD, and only once it's verified, it has been submitted for assessment. So that's very important to remember. It's only available for assessment once it's verified by the tutor. The last thing you need to do after you've waited the month, you will get feedback from the assessors and the moderators. One of two things will happen. It will either be green and it will say it was successful, but check the successful submissions as well. Sometimes we provide some guidance to interns. We do accept a submission, but we do give some feedback and some tips for next submission. So even if it's successful, just go and look at the report and make sure that your assessor or moderator didn't give you some feedback. The other option is your submission will show awaiting submission, and that means you will need to resubmit. As Tabang showed you, there's a report tab, so click on that, and there you will find feedback from your assessor. So the feedback is very important because there the assessor will provide some guidelines, or the moderator, to tell you what needs to be done. What should you change, or what should you add, or why the submission was not successful. So first of all, if you go back just a step, focus on your practice, do the 4 steps, and as I stated, make sure that your tutor verifies, and the last thing then is the feedback. So check again, is it appropriate for your practice setting? Read all the behavioral statements, decide on the evidence. We will talk about the 75% now, and follow through. As you complete each phase, make sure that what you write is relevant to what you have selected, the chosen outcome, and there again, refer to the checklist. So the requirements, Tabang has already stated that you need to submit 6 CPDs. You have to submit 1 from each domain, so 1 from number 1, 1 from number 2, and you have to be successful in all 6 of them. For each domain, you should choose 1 competency standard and read through all the behavioral statements. Say, for example, a CPD has 3 behavioral statements. So there's A, a B, and a C. Then you have to provide evidence for all 3 of them, all of the behavioral statements. If there are more than 4 behavioral statements, 4 or more, you have to provide evidence for at least 75%. So if you can remember the slide on 1.1, 1.1 has 4 behavioral statements, A, B, C, and D. So there you will have to provide evidence for at least 3 of them. 3 out of 4 is then the 75%. So please consult your manual and remember, if there are 3 behavioral statements, you have to provide evidence for all of them. It's very important to remember that your CPD should be your own work and that no group activities are allowed for your CPD submissions. So you have to do your CPDs on your own. So again, as I stated, you can see there's 1.3, for example. There is an A and a B, so we have to provide evidence for both of them. 1.1, A, B, C, and D, so we have to provide evidence for 3 of them. So now we get to the very important aspect of evidence. Evidence is very important for your CPD. If your evidence is not successful, then your CPD will not be successful. So if we look at the criteria for evidence, your evidence should be annotated, it should be current, it should be valid, it should be authentic, and it should be sufficient. So we will be looking at each one of these and discuss what it means. So it's very, very important for you to make sure that your evidence adheres to all of these requirements. So first of all, annotation. You will get a lot of feedback from the assessors and the moderators. The annotations is not clear. We're not sure. Please annotate properly. So what is annotation? Annotation gives meaning to your evidence. It's a mechanism to give meaning. It justifies why the evidence is there. It must be planned and meaningful. it must provide links to the behavioral statement. So it should tell the story of what you have done. It should provide the context to the assessors and the moderators. So an annotation is not a label, it's not a single word, it's not a scribble, and it should link to the behavioral statements. So we use the behaviorals or the annotations to describe or to tell the assessor why you have included something. If you think about a page from the GPP, if you just scan in a page from the GPP or the SAMF and you do not explain why you have included it, what you did with it, why is it there, then it has no meaning. So if you don't explain on the document why you have included this, it doesn't have any meaning. So it must tell a story, and the story is, what have I done to show a behavior? How have I used this piece of evidence to show that I am able to do this now? So if we look at a meaningful annotation, if we look at the date, on the one side we have this is the date. And on the other side, we have, for a prescription to be valid, it must be presented within 1 month after it was written. This is a valid prescription. So can you see the difference? On the right-hand side, we have this is the date. So all of us can see that it is the date, but you have to explain why is the date important. And that you can only do with an annotation. You can only provide meaning to something if you explain it on the evidence. Explain to the assessor why this was important to you. If you have a patient information leaflet, for example, and there's a contraindication, mark it, highlight it, make a circle, and tell the assessor and the moderator, this was important and I used this information in this way. So you provide meaning through annotation. We're quickly going to look at an invoice, and this would be applicable to supply chain, for example, and it's 3.2. So if you look at this invoice and we just scan in an invoice, you have no idea what I want to tell you with this invoice. You can agree that it's an invoice. So if we go further, how will we annotate this? How will we give meaning to this invoice? This is one way of doing the invoice, but you can now see the name of the pharmacy, the medicine ordered, the batch number, and the account number. But still, why is it important? What is the meaning of the labels that you have provided? Why have you circled the batch number? What is the importance of the batch number? So you can see by providing only labels, you haven't given meaning to this invoice. So let's go further. So this one is just a little bit neater. You can see the invoice was from the wholesaler, the name of the medicine, but still it's just the invoice and we still are not sure what the meaning of this invoice is. So is this annotation good? If you had to assess this, what do you think the intern wanted to tell us with these labels? So if we look at the last example, and you have to evaluate this and tell me if you think this is more applicable. So you can see it's more than a label. The intern is telling me, I checked the name of the pharmacy on the parcel to confirm that it is indeed for me. I checked the medicine name, the strength, and the pack size. The batch number, I compared the batch number with the batch number on the parcel to ensure that it is the same. This is important for batch traceability. So can you see the difference between a label and a proper annotation? And here you can see the annotation provides meaning and it shows us what you did with the information, that you are actually able to take an invoice and know what the meaning of all the information on the invoice is. So you can see the parcel was received in good order, the medicine was not damaged or short-dated, the medicine was captured onto the system and updated the stock levels. So now we can see there's some context, we know exactly what this intern did with this, and here at the top, you can see that it is linked to a behavioral statement, 3.2e. So it's very important to link the evidence to the behavioral statement. If this invoice was here and it was not linked, then the assessor and moderator wouldn't have known why you have included this. What are you trying to say with this? But if you link it to a behavioral statement, we clearly know why this is included and what you have done with the invoice. So do you think this is a good quality annotation? Yes, that is, because we now clearly know what the intern did. So the first thing this next thing we're going to look at is current. What do we mean with it is current? Please make sure not to use, for example, research or anything that you did in your undergraduate studies. It should be done this year. The entry must relate to exposure during your internship. The evidence must be collected during your internship, and please, no undergraduate work. So it should be current and it should be done in this year. For the evidence to be valid, it must pertain to the specific competency being addressed. Say, for example, you have selected pharmacist-initiated therapy and you include a prescription as evidence. It would not be valid because, as you know, pharmacist-initiated therapy, we can give up to Schedule 2 without a prescription. So a prescription for 2.6 would therefore be not valid. It's very important if you are doing calculations or make any factual error statements, make any mistakes, then immediately the CPD is not valid. So if you made a calculation error or you gave a patient with asthma something that they are not allowed to use, or there are some contraindications, then it will not be deemed valid. So if the evidence is not valid, the other 4 criteria does not count. If, for example, you work out a dosage incorrectly, then automatically the CPD is not successful. So, for example, if the competency standard is about how to fry an egg and your evidence is about the crispy bacon, it has no value, so it will therefore be not valid. Authentic means that it's your own work. The evidence must be verified online by your tutor. So remember the tutor verification. It's very, very important to know that it's not submitted unless your tutor has verified. How can I show the assessor and the moderator that it's my own work? You can do this by signing your evidence, asking your tutor to sign the evidence. If you're an academic intern, pharmacist under whose supervision you completed your 400 hours, or in manufacturing, ask them to sign, have a name, a signature, a P number, and a date. Show us, this is my signature, this is me. Authenticate your own evidence and show that it's your own work. Make sure again that your tutor verifies, and it's your responsibility to check. Sufficient. We have spoken about sufficient. If there are more than four or more behavioral statements, you have to provide evidence for at least 75%. Make sure that your evidence is enough. You have enough evidence, and the focus is on the quality of the evidence and not the quantity. Please don't scan in the whole GPP or the whole Medicines Act, only the sections that's applicable. And please remember, you are not allowed to use the same piece of evidence for more than one competency standard. So you cannot use the same prescription, for example, that you used in 5.3. You cannot use that in 3.4 again. So it should be new evidence for every CPD that you do. So if we talk about evidence, interns are very creative and we receive a lot of interesting information and evidence, but please make sure if you select something, add a date stamp. It's, as you've seen with the invoice, it's meaningless unless it's authenticated and it's annotated. It can be anybody in a photograph. Again, make sure patient confidentiality. You cannot identify patients in your photographs, cover the patient's face. You can identify yourself. So make sure that photographs have a stamp so that we know it was taken this year and that it is authenticated. As we've spoken about the GPP and, for example, the SAMF, if you are going to use the SAMF, only the section that's applicable and write on the document which reference it is, because you're not going to include the front page, which edition, which page number, and not only the page from this SAMF, but what you did with this. We always say to the interns, if you scan a page of the GPP or the SAMF without any annotations, the only thing that you are proving is that you are able to scan. So please, as we stated, provide the context, provide the explanation why it's there, do proper annotations. For delivery notes, we sometimes get delivery notes with 2 or 3 signatures on it. We don't know who signed for it. We don't know why it's there. So what does it show? Who received it? Who signed for it? If signatures are not annotated, it has no meaning. So you can see how important annotation and proper annotation is to describe and provide the context to the assessors and the moderators. So put yourself in the assessor's shoe before submitting. Ask yourself, what does this evidence show? Does it really prove what I want it to prove? Does it say what I am trying to say? And be very critical of yourself. And as we said, put yourself in the assessor or the moderator's shoe and think, if I had to assess this, would I have found it successful? Would I have thought the intern is able to do this? We'll probably point to a need for more discussion or more annotation. So be critical of your own CPD before you submit. Evidence, no high glossy photos. They don't scan in very well. They get very dark. It's very important. Labels are sometimes unreadable. The quality is not good. If the assessor or the moderator cannot read the evidence, then they cannot assess it. So please do not upload things upside down. Make sure that it's readable once you've scanned it in, because sometimes it's clear when you have the document, but once it's scanned in, it's very difficult to read or it's blurry. So make sure what the quality of the scanned documents is. It must be clear and legible. Please submit your evidence in one PDF document. It's much easier to provide the whole storyline in one document with all the evidence and all the annotations. Then, as you've seen now with previous annotations, annotate, 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 and I cannot stress that enough. It is very important because without annotation, as you've seen with the invoice, the evidence has no meaning. So link it to the behavioral statement, identify your signature if it's applicable, and remember, the assessor is not there and they do not know you. So provide the context. Provide all the information that you can. And by all the information, I'm not saying scan the whole GPP. Provide the evidence for the relevant document. So what kind of evidence are we looking at? So for example, if you are providing information to a patient, say we are looking at medicine dispensing, then we will probably look at the prescription and what else can you think about? We maybe use the patient information leaflet, we maybe use the SAMF depending on the scenario. So there we will have a look at what information you will be providing to the patient. But if we are providing evidence or providing information to a group, what do you think will be evidence there? So if you quickly think to yourself, you have to prove that you provided information to a group. What can we have a look there? Examples will be an attendance register, a presentation, the reference material that you used, the feedback. So there's a lot of things that you can provide as evidence. You just have to sit and think, how can I prove this? Remember, you should be the only presenter. We have an attendance register that have your name on, the date, the venue, the time. Remember patient confidentiality on that again. If you want to give feedback on a presentation, remember the feedback is not rating you as a presenter. You can add that if you want to, but it should reflect the knowledge of the audience about the content of the presentation. So did they understand the information regarding HIV, or do they have a clearer picture of asthma, or whatever your topic was? So the feedback should be on the topic, and if the information that you provided was clear. So if you are consulting with a patient, what evidence can you provide? For example, a patient history, a prescription, a blue copy, a label, or anything else that you used. If you are consulting with a prescriber, we would like to see the reason for the consultation, the reference material used. Somebody can verify that you spoke to the prescriber. If you know the prescriber very well, they can verify that you spoke to them. So there's a lot of information or evidence that you can provide if you just think about it. Please, your references should be scientific, not Wikipedia, and not, I don't know where some of the interns get the information. Make sure that it is a legal document or a scientific document or a patient information leaflet, and that it is scientific. So sometimes you attend a meeting. What can that be then? Agenda, attendance register, minutes of a meeting, but not only attending a meeting is not sufficient. You have to show what your contribution was. If you are just sitting and you are not contributing, what have you learned? So if you are working with data, for example, academic interns, why did you collect the data? You will include maybe a screening report, or if you have a health campaign and you do blood pressure screenings, you can include that. The data analysis, you will have conclusions, you will have a report. So there's a lot of information that you can include as evidence. You just have to think about it and remember, let the behavioral statements guide you. Last, we have an evidence checklist as well. So please make sure of that and use this. You have sufficient evidence. It's annotated. It's linked to behavioral statements. It's readable. And there's no patient confidentiality that is breached. So in summary, for the evidence, it's proof of what you did. It's not merely reading an article. It's showing us what you did with the information. It's not theoretical. So if you are not doing this, don't select the behavioral statement. If you are not in manufacturing, don't select something like that. If you are not doing a medicine recall, don't select that. It should be an action that you actually did. It's not witnessing something. It's that you are able to do this. And you must convince the assessor and the moderator that you actually performed this activity. It must be professional and it must be neat and clear and not just scribbles. That you performed this. So I think this, Prof. Butler will continue with this. So I think this is where we will have a break. If Tabang can maybe just confirm.
Thanks, Adele. Yes, we're going to take a break. It's 25 to 8. So if we can come back at 7:45. Let's reduce it to 5 minutes so that we can be able to cover everything. Thank you. I'm sorry. It will be 10 minutes from 25 to 7:45. I'm sorry, it will be 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, okay, thank you, colleagues. We're going to continue with our presentation, and Prof. Butler is going to take us through. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you, Tabang. Good evening, everybody. I so wish that, I could see and know who's out there, but anyhow, even though I don't know who's out there, warm welcome. You've had a fantastic session up to now, an introduction from the logistics side from the office, and then Adele has taken you through the whole CPD cycle, talked to you a lot about evidence and annotation. And this, up to a little while ago, was actually the meat of our presentation. But every year, the moderators and the assessors get together, and we keep asking ourselves, what else can we put in the presentation that can help the interns? What can we say to them? What can we add in this training that can make it more likely that they'll get competent outcomes for the first time around? And so the bulk of what I'm going to do now is the outcome of those kinds of deliberations. And the first thing we thought we'd do is you've seen, Adele has taken you through an example of evidence and bad annotation and good annotation. But now I'm going to take a whole entry, and we're going to build up this whole entry, and it's just going to pull together what you've heard before. So we're looking at the CPD entry example. So we said everything starts with a trigger, and here we see the trigger. Something happened. You were asked to participate in a public health campaign. So that's the trigger. And so you think about, oh, yes, this can work. I can build a CPD entry from this. So if you think about your stepwise approach to CPD entries, the first, number one, right at the bottom of that list there, it said, choose a domain. So this one is pretty easy. You're asked to participate in a public health campaign. That one's right away, it says, domain one, public health. Step two in the process, it says, choose a competency standard. So you'll go to domain one and you'll read there are 6 different competency standards under domain one. And if you read through them, you will recognize right away that this trigger, this event where you were asked to participate in a public health campaign, it fits perfectly with 1.1, which is labeled the promotion of health and wellness. So you check your manual, and the manual, it's actually a pretty good idea. I know these days in your generation, everything is online, but do yourselves a favor and actually print out your manual. It's just makes life a lot easier, and you can very quickly, work around and look at all the competency standards. So you'll check, you've decided on domain one, competency standard 1.1, and you look at it and you'll see there, and the first thing you'll see, where are the behavioral statements? There they are, A, B, C, and D. So you're thinking, okay, now I'm going to go on to planning. Now let's move on. Okay, we're still busy with reflection. So you've decided your domain, your competency standard, you need to give it a title, and you saw there's a lovely descriptive title, exactly what you were going to do and where you were going to do it. You can describe what triggered your learning. And now in your reflection, you very clearly need to say what you need to learn. Now, look at this carefully. I needed to learn how to provide advice and participate in a public health campaign. And this happens to be a public health campaign on COVID-19. Now, if you had written there, I needed to learn about COVID-19, can you see that that's not an appropriate learning need for this particular domain and competency standard? Because the competency standard isn't about you learning about an issue. The competency standard is about you promoting health and wellness. So you must learn how to promote health and wellness by providing advice and participating. So that's very, very important. When you are formulating how you're going to describe your learning need, make sure that it's in terms of the actual competency standard. And it's not, I think we had a nice example earlier from Adele that if it's pharmacist-initiated therapy or something, and the patient, an asthmatic patient who doesn't know how to use an MDI, your learning need must be in terms of how you are going to explain and counsel and teach that patient to use the MDI. The learning need is not that the patient needs to learn how to use an MDI. So that's a very important thing there. Make sure that your learning need is in terms of the actual domain and competency standard. And then the last part that you must write very clearly in your reflection is what you hope to achieve. And here you can see, again, it's expressed in terms of the competency standard in that domain. Okay, now we can move on to planning. And you heard earlier that we should use the behavioral standards to structure your planning. And so here you'll see it was A, B, C, and D. And you can see all of this. You've written what you plan to do. And you can see you're going to include information health promotion because the first behavioral statement says provide advice on health promotion. And then there's one about healthy lifestyles, disease prevention, A, B, C. And then, what about D? So you go and you look at your behavioral statements, and D says actually participate in the public health campaign. So to have evidence that you have participated, you must plan to how are you going to get that evidence that you actually participated. And the only way you're going to get that evidence is to ask your participants, ask them for feedback. So those are the things you think about in your planning. And by using your behavioral statements to structure your planning, you'll make sure that you've got everything in place. Okay? So you think about in your planning, I'm going to have to get feedback about my presentation. Okay. So here we see that you've covered all your bases, everything that you plan to do, and it's all in terms of the behavioral statements. Right. So now we're swapping over to the third phase of the CPD cycle, the implementation. What did I do? You write very clearly what you did, what you made, where you presented, you did the screening, you received the feedback. But what I want you to look at very carefully on this slide is not only is the story here of what you did, but you've linked it to the evidence as you've labeled. So you've got evidence A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So obviously you've got, what is A, B, C, D, E, F, G? That's 7. So you've got 7 pieces of evidence, and you've labeled them A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And each one of those you've linked to a specific behavioral statement. So you've labeled your evidence and you've linked it to a behavioral statement. Okay, so obviously now when you've thought about, by doing your planning that way, by using your behavioral statements to guide your planning, you know you're going to be in the pound seats when it comes to doing your implementation. Okay, so you think about this, so what possible evidence, and again, this comes from your planning. You talked about which documents you're going to use, what tools you're going to use to create your poster, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so here's all your evidence. Okay. And you'll see, because all this came from your behavioral statements, you'll know that you've covered them all. And of course, when you have your evidence, you will use the same as you wrote in your implementation there. So on evidence, piece of evidence that you've labeled as A, you will also put on there 1.1A or 1.1B or 1.1C, whichever one of the behavioral statements that it refers to. Okay, let's move on. Then we're looking at the last phase of the CPD cycle. This is where you look back at what you have done. And so very clearly, we need, and what we find that where the interns go wrong is they don't include all the different sections of the evaluation. So in evaluation, you must very clearly don't think that the assessor is going to just know what you learned. You must very clearly say, I learned, blah, 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 blah. And look at this here. This entry doesn't say, I learned all about COVID-19. Because you learning about COVID-19 doesn't say that you have promoted health and wellness. It doesn't fit within the public health domain, which is domain 1. But you learned how to provide advice. So again, when you're describing your learning, make sure you describe your learning in terms of the competency standard within that domain. The next requirement under evaluation is you must say how you use this new knowledge. So the first thing there, you clearly describe what your new knowledge, what can you do now that you couldn't do before this activity. Now, we want you to tell us how you subsequently use that knowledge. This has got nothing to do with what you described in your implementation. It's a new scenario. It's a new situation. So I subsequently participated in a diabetic screening day. Okay, so your implementation was all about a COVID presentation that you did somewhere and some COVID screening or whatever. And then you said, those skills that I learned, the skills of providing advice and participating in a public health campaign, I was able to use it at a future time. Okay, we do not require you to provide evidence of the subsequent application, but you must describe it in enough detail so that the assessor is quite clear that you did something later where you use those new skills that you've described here. Right, but we know that CPD is a cycle. And as a cycle, as we're coming to what seems to be the end, we must think about, I must go back and I must start another revolution of this cycle. So the next requirement in your evaluation part of your entry, of your CPD entry, is what do you identify now as your next learning need? Okay. So this one was about, you identified a learning need at the beginning that you needed to know how to provide advice and participate in a public health campaign. So you've done that, you've learned it, you've applied it, but now you need to go on to the next cycle. I would like to learn more on, or I want to do blah, 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 blah. And then lastly, the fourth part of the evaluation is describe the impact that this whole entry, that what you've described in this entry, describe the impact that has had on your practice. Okay, you're now more aware of it, you're more confident or whatever. So again, this is an area where you will probably the most common comments, the most common feedback that assessors give to interns is evaluation incomplete. No subsequent application, no future learning needs. So you've seen the checklist. Remember, go back to the checklist, all of these 4 things again. So to recap, in this example, you see the 4 things are there: what you learned, how you subsequently applied it, your future learning needs, and overall the impact of that learning on your practice. Okay. Right, so you've done your CPD entry, you've submitted it, your tutors verified it, it's been submitted, and it now goes to the assessor. For each little subsection on that CPD entry, the assessor assigns a mark. And the marks are mostly for each of the subsections on a scale of 0 to 3. So you can get a 0, a 1, a 2, or a 3. I promise you we don't work in half marks here. Okay. So in order to earn 3 marks, okay, and that word there, earn, is very, very important. No assessor is just going to give you 3 marks because they say, oh, poor intern, so they work so hard and I'm sure it's a tough life out there. I'm going to give them 3. Sorry, guys, you're in the real world now. To get the 3 marks for the little subsections in each phase of the CPD cycle, you have to earn them. And how do you earn the 3 marks? You must meet all the requirements. Okay, so you're sitting there and saying, what requirements? Don't stress. You must just follow the assessment criteria for each of the 4 phases. And you will find in your manuals, there is a page there which gives you in detail. It shows you all the sections of each of the phases and exactly what criteria are required for each of them. Okay, so to get the 3 marks, and of course that's what you're aiming at. You want to pass this thing, you want to get it, be competent. You will make sure that you have met all the criteria. So that's specific. Of course, overall, you're professional people, and we do expect a professional communication style. At a very minimum, we do expect you to proofread it and at least spell your words correctly, at least correct your grammar. And please, guys, if you are mentioning medication and you're using a trade name, please capitalize your trade name. We want to see that this is somebody, a professional person, who is actually proud of their CPD entry. Because remember, this isn't just something that you have to do to get through your internship. This is your new life now. You are now at the start of your journey to being a pharmacist, and CPD is going to be part of that journey every single year. So it's something that we take pride in as part of our professional activities. So we do expect you to do it properly. Okay, let's look a little bit more at assessment. So we said that there are three marks. 0 is you haven't done it or it's completely wrong. So 0, for example, for evidence, you got that lovely example. If your evidence is not valid at all, then it will be a 0. Okay, but you go through this. This document is available for you. I'm suggesting again, this is something that you print out so that you can pick it up quickly. Keep that in front of you. Look at it. Ask yourself on learning need. Have I got that? Have I got that? Have I got the next one? Have I got everything here to give me the 3? In my planning, under the description of the planning, have I got all 4 of that? Okay, and etc. Same for implementation. Right, so you're going to end up with a score, with a mark. And hopefully that mark is closer to 100% than to 0%. No, very, very few cases where interns get 0. But having said that, very, very few get 100 as well. But we'd like to see it, 70%, 80%, 90%. And if you'd simply follow the guidelines, use those checklists, look at the assessment criteria, the 90% and the 95%, it's absolutely well within reach. But it's up to you to pay attention to those checklists. That's why we've made those kinds of documents available to you. Okay. So you've submitted your CPD entries on time. A month later, you get the results are released, and you look and you go and you look at your report and you look at the assessor's comments. I've been at this game for many, many years. I think it's time I need to retire from doing this. But there's one thing I can assure you, interns, that the assessors they're on point when it comes to providing you with feedback. It's something that we work with as a group from year to year to year, because we know how important that feedback from the assessors is for you. So, I want you to, don't ignore their feedback, because as assessors, we work very hard to give you that feedback. So, feedback's not only negative. You had this comment before, and sometimes we learn better from a positive. If we have a positive feedback on something that we've done, that reinforces the way that you've done that entry, and so you know to do it the same a good way in the future. But if there is need for critique, it will be there as well. And no assessor is just simply going to say to you, not done well enough. Okay? They will provide you with guidance as to why you only earned a 0 or a 1 for that particular aspect of the CPD entry. They will always give you specific pointers. All right, and we do find that most of the comments is about evidence annotation. Okay, so make it your mission this year, the interns of 2022. Why can't you be the group of interns who's going to give us the best annotated evidence that we've ever seen? That would be absolutely wonderful. So as soon as you get your assessed entry comes back to you, look at the comments. Use those comments for your next entry. If your entry says competent, that's great. If it says awaiting submission, that means you've got some work to do. That means if it says awaiting submission, you have to work on it, resubmit for reassessment. Now, it's actually quite strange how we've come across instances where interns say, oh, please, they really want me to do this. I'm going to take my chances. I'm going to resubmit this entry without changing anything. I'm sure the next assessor that gets my entry is not going to be so full of nonsense. Well, I'm sorry. What's going to happen is that your entry is going to go back to exactly the same assessor. And that assessor will see their comments, and they will check your resubmission, and they will check whether you've actually done what was suggested. And it is actually quite scary to see how many times the assessor simply says, you haven't done anything that was suggested. So guys, don't waste your time. It's really not worth it. If the assessors point you in a direction where they are showing you how your entry needs to be improved, just improve your entry, and that's the way in which you're going to get a competent outcome. Right. So just fix it. Don't bother trying to resubmit it without fixing. You're just going to waste time. It'll be another month, another 6 weeks before it goes. All right. So submit early, submit regularly. Take note of the assessors' comments. Okay. Let's move on. More about this is I've talked about the fact that it goes to the same assessor. So the requirements are 6 CPD entries. You are allowed to resubmit 3 without incurring any fees. But if the 4th one that needs resubmission, then there is a fee. So I think that's pretty good motivation not to have to, to try to do these CPDs as well as possible so that you don't need to go through the reassessment. And it's doable, guys. And just think how you can brag with everybody. I submitted my 6 CPDs and I didn't have to resubmit it. I'm telling you, that gives you bragging rights for a long time.
Oh, it's an overtime.
I commented on professionalism. You are a professional person, and as the hallmark of being a professional person is to be professional 24/7 every day of your lives as pharmacists. And here, of course, plagiarism is absolutely unacceptable. And the universe has a way of teaching us a lesson. And this has happened. We've had interns that have tried to plagiarize. And almost if we could hear the interns say, why don't you and I work together on this and then we submit our things? There's so many assessors. What's the chance that the same assessor is going to have both our entries? You know what, guys? Do you know how often it's happened where interns have tried to plagiarize, They've tried to work together. And what happens? These entries go random. They're randomly assigned to assessors. And the universe laughs and says, haha, these two are not going to get away with it, you know, and the two entries end up with the same assessor. It's just not worth it. It's just not the behavior that we expect from professional people. If anybody is foolish enough to try to do anything like this, the system will take care of you. And, you know, it's very early in your professional career, and you don't want a black mark against your name. So, guys, don't bother about it. It's as easy to do your CPD entries properly as it is to try and copy somebody else's. Okay. And as I said, the universe has a way of making jokes with us, and the assessors, an assessor will, this looks familiar. I've seen this one before, and I know what assessor. They will go through all the entries that they've assessed until they find the ones that look alike. Okay, let's move on. Confidentiality has been noted before. I always like to remind the interns, how would you feel if your confidential information was out there in the universe for other people to read? I don't think anybody would be happy to have their confidential information exposed. And so keep that in mind. And so you need to always remember that it is never, ever appropriate to reveal patient identity. All right? So make sure it's completely, just click, okay? No, back one, please. No. But you see here, make sure the name is completely obscured and not just scribbled over this, because you can see the name comes up. We don't normally have too many problems with interns not obscuring names on prescriptions, but remember labels, remember medical aid copies, remember Schedule 6 registers. Those are the places where we find that interns forget that there's patient information. Now, when we talk about confidentiality, it is only patient information to which confidentiality applies. If it's a doctor, a hospital, another pharmacist, these are people or places where the information that exists there is gathered in the during the course of their professional activity. So there is absolutely no need to obscure a doctor's name on a prescription, because that's part of his professional practice, is to write a prescription. Okay. So if you are presenting to fellow staff members, there is no need to obscure their names, because they are attending your presentation as part of their working day, as part of their job. But if you are presenting to the public, then you need to obscure their names. Okay? So always remember that. Otherwise, we sometimes end up, we've got evidence there that we can't use because everything's been blanked out. So confidentiality, patients only. Okay. Right. So you've done your domain, you've chosen your competency standard. Now that sounds easy. Choose your domain, choose your competency standard. But sometimes it's not that easy to choose your competency standard. So what we've done is we've compiled the next part of this presentation to give you some guidelines. So I have to do one CPD from each of the 6 domains. So what we've done is we've taken each of the competency standards and we've classified them on this decision-making grid here. We've taken each one and we've said, is it recommended? Is it possible? Or is it challenging? Now let's look at what these labels mean. If we label a particular competency standard as recommended, it means that any intern should be able to complete that CS without any problems. In other words, that represents a good choice for you, and it shouldn't present any problems. Okay, so step number one, you try to go for the ones which are recommended. And these are the ones where, you know, you're going to be able to find the evidence, you're going to be able to complete them without any hassles. Then there are a number of competency standards which we've decided to label as possible. We're not saying that you can't choose it, but we are saying that if you do decide to choose one of those that's labeled as possible, you need to think very carefully. And I do suggest that most of the thinking needs to be done at the planning stage, and particularly the planning around, will I be able to collect sufficient evidence to cover sufficient of the behavioral statements? And you probably find that a lot of those, it'll be easy to collect evidence maybe for one of the behavioral statements, but not for all of them. But we do have some interns who, you know, have certain scenarios that are not common, and or we have interns that are somewhat in unusual practice settings. And that's why we've labeled it possible, because there might be the odd intern who's able to do it. But guys, choose to do one that's labeled as possible at your peril. Okay. And make sure before you start in it that you can provide sufficient valid evidence. If it's marked as challenging, the synonym for challenging here is avoid, and it means do not choose that one. Okay. It'll be extremely difficult, and there's one or two that, you know, that maybe we will show you there that maybe an intern in an academic environment will be able to do, or perhaps it will only be for an intern in a manufacturing sector. But in general, if a CS has been labeled as challenging, just walk away from it, unless you're the kind of person that wants to make life difficult. So the next 6 slides, I'm not going to go through every one of these. This information is there. So for every domain, we've given you all of the competency standards, and we've given you the rating. What do we think? So you'll see with domain 1 that 1.1 and 1.6 are recommended. In other words, those are the easiest ones for you to do. 1.5, which is epidemic and disaster management, it's doable if you are able to collect enough evidence. So think very carefully. 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, walk away from them, don't even go there. Okay. 1.4, for example, was health economics. There is no way that an intern, if you look at the behavioral statements for 1.4 health economics, there is no way that any intern can do that. Okay. All right, so you'll move on. You'll see their domain 2, the same thing again. We've got 3 recommended ones here, 2 and 4 possible ones. 2.8. 2.8 is clinical trials. For 99.99 of the interns, avoided. But there might be an odd intern. I'm not saying that as an intern you're odd, but sort of an unusual situation. Only if you are an intern who's actively involved in a clinical trial would you be able to successfully complete 2.8. So for most people, just walk away from 2.8. Okay, let's look at the others very quickly. Here's one which is possible, but with a caveat. 3.1, which is medicine production according to GXP. If you're in a hospital, if you're in a community pharmacy, if you're in an academic sector, you are not allowed to do that. Because if you read the entry, that competence standard, it will say there, does this apply to me? It will say there, it applies only to pharmacists working in the manufacturing sector. So be very clear about that one. It's only for manufacturing sector. 3.24, so there's a couple of others that are recommended. 3.6, I want to spend a second on 3.6. 3.6 is about medicine disposal and destruction. Many interns try that, and they can get evidence for one of the behavioral statements, but it is extraordinarily difficult to get enough. So, you know, just be very careful there. Read those behavioral statements. Okay, let's look at 4. Same thing here. 5 is an easy one because you cannot do 5.1, 5.2, 5.4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Okay, so this is an easy domain. 6, as you can see here, the challenging seems to be taking over in domain 6. 6.1, 4, 5, 8, they're all challenging. We've gone even further with domain 6. We've gone beyond challenging. Remember, we said challenging means avoid. 6.7 goes beyond challenging. It just says no, it is absolutely not possible. 6.7 is supervision of other researchers. Remember that the competency framework is not designed for interns. It's designed for pharmacists. So here's an example of a competency standard that would be very applicable for some pharmacists at the intermediate and at the advanced levels. So 6.7, as I said, the restriction is even more severe than simply being challenging. It is not possible. Okay. Now, I need to say something else. Can you just go back one, please? Thanks. With this domain 6, because that's about education. 6.2 and 6.3. Let's just look at those. 6.2 is recommended because many interns do training. Okay, if you are doing training, then you use 6.2, which is provision of education and training. 6.3 is possible. So what's the difference here? It's because 6.C says practice embedded education or workplace education. And 6.3 applies only to the formal training of undergraduate pharmacy students. Okay, so a lot of interns struggle here with which one to choose. So if you're doing training of pharmacist assistants, for example, it's 6.2, only possible to do 6.3, and that would be your academic interns who do get involved in the teaching program. Okay, so use this, make sure you use that. Okay, so now you've been able to choose your competency standard, you're going on, and now you're going to step number 4, and you complete the cycle. What we've done, we've also realized over the years that many interns have some difficulties with evidence. So we've prepared a similar outline now in the next 6 slides, where we've taken each one of the competency standards, and we've, well, not each one of them, but definitely the recommended ones, and we've given you a few tips, a few guidelines, a few pointers as to the type of evidence that you could use. Okay, again, we're not going to go through all of them. These slides are here for you to check. Okay, so you'll see that the recommended, the ones that are possible, we give some idea why did we say it was possible, what makes it difficult. Okay, so you can see, use this, and this is, as I say, it's the collective wisdom of the a big group of assessors who have done many assessments in their time. 4, and then on 5, I'm going to talk a little bit about 5.3, seeing that that is your compulsory one. What do you need as evidence? It's about professional and personal practice. So how do we practice professionally? We obviously practice within a legal framework. Okay. So 5.3, there's going to be, you cannot do 5.3 without referring to legislation. Okay, so it is impossible to do a 5.3 unless one piece of your evidence is a piece of legislation which is properly annotated, okay, or code of conduct or whatever. Something else, if you look at the behavioral standards for 5.3, it talks about providing evidence there that you are keeping abreast of current or recently amended legislation. So guys, when you are including your legislation, showing what you read, showing what part of the legislation you refer to, make sure it's the latest. Not every piece of legislation, of course, is updated, but you may well check. There may well have been some updates already in 2022. We would expect you to use the latest version. Okay, so check your regulations, check what is the most recent. It may not be what you were taught in your undergraduate course, so always make sure that you've checked if there hasn't been a regulation change in 2022. So it must be the current or the most recently. To practice professionally, as every pharmacist, we need to have professional indemnity. So you need to provide evidence that you have. But just putting an indemnity certificate isn't enough. Remember that it must be annotated. Okay. All right, let's look at 6. And again, you'll see here 6.2, this is that training one where, say you're doing some training for some pharmacist assistants. If you read very carefully, it talks there about discussing your training program with a more experienced colleague. So make sure that you include that you explain who the colleague is and that you explain what the interaction is, and you provide evidence of that interaction with a more experienced colleague. If you are an academic intern and you are involved in the training, which is part of training undergraduate pharmacy students, you must provide evidence that your interaction with the students was part of a formal undergraduate module. It's not just that you had some pharmacy students come and work in the pharmacy where you're doing your internship and you showed them how to use Unisolve. Okay, it needs to be linked. So part of your evidence will have to be the module descriptor or whatever. Okay, so you must provide evidence that it is linked to a formal undergraduate module. My last comment on 6.6 is a recommended one because that is the research one. Guys, a research proposal is insufficient. So you need to be working quite early on this one if you're going to be doing 6.6, because you need a complete research project. You need results, you need everything that you'd have in your proposal, but you also need implementation and you need your results, you need your conclusion. In other words, a whole complete research project. In addition, make sure that you provide evidence that your research proposal has received ethical approval. Okay, so just writing up a proposal, and this is what I plan to do, it's not going to be accepted. Okay, all right. So hopefully there are some tutors online as well. So I'm speaking now to the tutors. This is a two-way street. Yes, it's the interns here, but the interns can't do it alone. This is a partnership between intern and tutor. And I think that for many pharmacists, they will look back at their internship here and they will, those memories of that relationship with your internship tutor is very special, and it carries you forward into your professional life as a pharmacist. So tutors, don't underestimate the role and the importance of your role in the intern's life. So you, the experienced one, and it is obviously most important that you are a role model. And as a role model, I think being a tutor to an intern is a good opportunity for you as a tutor to take stock of your own practice. I think everyone, we can become complacent. We can get into bad habits. It happens. It's not a pharmacy specific thing, but it can happen. And this is such a wonderful opportunity, tutors, that during this time to say, am I actually practicing optimally? Am I doing everything correctly? Am I being the best role model that I can possibly be? And it happens. We all slip. We're all human. So use this opportunity to, as I say, to take stock and to make those little adjustments to your practice that may be appropriate. Okay. Of course, not only are you a role model, but you're a mentor. And mentor, we often erroneously think that as a tutor, you're a mentor to an intern. So it's a one-way street. You are helping the intern to grow. Absolutely, that is true. But mentorship is actually a two-way street. And that we are hoping that you look at this experience of being a tutor as an opportunity for you to also benefit. It's not only you giving of yourself and supporting your intern, but to using that experience to growing yourself, to improving your professional ability. And very important, you can use your tutorship, you can use that to as one of your own CPD entries. So domain 6, okay, there you are, you can go do your domain 6. So tutors, your one of your jobs is, as I said, communication. It's got to be an open communication, and I would hope that there isn't a tutor out there that sees something or knows when they get, I think as tutors you get an SMS saying that your intern has submitted and that you need to verify it. And I'm hoping that as tutors, you don't wait for that as the first opportunity to see what your intern has done, but that you have open communication and that you are discussing things along the way. Because I think that is the most beneficial, the most fruitful way to spend that year with your intern. So you get your SMS, you see that your intern has submitted, let's say your intern has submitted 2.1 patient consultation. As a tutor, you need to evaluate the entire entry. Okay, so cast your eye on it. Make sure that they've done the reflection and the planning and the implementation. That the evidence is there. That the evidence is annotated. That they've done the evaluation. And most importantly, tutors, please pay attention to the evidence. Okay, make sure that it's been authenticated. Whatever. If you're happy and you think everything is fine, you press submit and it goes off through the ether, and your intern's submission now has been officially submitted. Okay. And as I said, keep an open communication. Remind your interns, because they can be a little bit lost at times and think that the deadline applies to when they submit. No, the deadline actually applies when you submit it. If you don't think that the entries are as good as it can be, chat, talk about it, suggest where they can make a correction, make an improvement. It's best for your intern to make the improvement now before it is submitted, because then the likelihood that entry is going to be deemed to be competent is just so much greater. Okay, and you can then avoid the dreaded resubmission and reassessment. And then lastly, tutors, when your interns' entries have been assessed, I think it's great to have a chat with them, talk about the assessor comments, and use it again to help them to do better or do as well as in the next one, or to do better in the next entry. Okay. Of course, tutors, what I'm saying now, it doesn't take away from the fact that the ultimate responsibility does lie with the interns. And if the intern is going to send you an entry at 10 p.m. on Wednesday, next date, on the 1st of April, 10 p.m. on 1st of April, and you're already in bed or asleep, well, it's not your responsibility that the intern's entry is then going to be late and going to be delayed for another month. And maybe something that you need to think about and something that you need to reflect on in their progress reports. Has your intern developed the sense of responsibility? And I think, let's say there's a late submission, if you talk about it and, help them to develop the life skills where they can plan their time better, that'll be really valuable input from you as a tutor. Okay. Tutors, especially when things change. Every year there's a little tweak, there's a little twist, something which is a little bit different. So if you had an intern 5 years ago, don't assume that what you knew that intern needed to do is the same as what your intern this year needs to do. So, keep abreast of what there is. And of course, as tutors, there's a whole raft of wonderful characteristics that we're sure that you all display. And, life is a journey, and the best journeys are the ones that we enjoy. So while the intern is going on this journey, we really hope that you as tutors see this as a journey as well, and that you grow through this journey, and that you thoroughly enjoy the journey. And I think just take a second just to think about the pride that you feel. And there's nothing wrong with pride, okay? How proud you could be if it's your intern that submitted 6 CPDs and each one was assessed as being competent. No resubmissions, no reassessments. How are you going to feel? Isn't that going to be a wonderful feeling as a tutor that it's your intern and that you did it together? And, as I said, think about Domain 6. Use this mentorship, use this opportunity to do your own CPDs. So finally, we come to the end of this presentation. It's all about learning, experience, developing, succeeding, and becoming a true lifelong learner. Interns, this round of CPD entrance is your start on your journey towards becoming a lifelong learner and being a lifelong learner. Tutors, you're on this path, and together, each and every one of us as pharmacists, we will be doing CPD every year because we know one of the attributes of being a pharmacist is to be a lifelong learner. And that's why CPD is so important. And that brings me to the end of my part of the presentation. Please, everybody online, don't forget to complete the attendance register. And then we're going to leave it on the screen with the contact details while we go over to the Q&A session. If you can just put it on the screen with the contact details, there we are. All right, and the Q&A session is now open, and I believe the questions will be read out. And I think what we'll do, we'll probably take turns in answering the question, or if it's a question that somebody from the office needs to answer.
Thanks, Prof. We have a question from YouTube. Tegan Watkins asked, can you submit multiple CPDs before a deadline or only one CPD before each?
Multiple. Okay, you can, if by the 1st of, where are we now, 1st of April, you have 3 ready, then submit your 3. Okay. It's not 1 per deadline. Everybody got that? Okay.
Thanks, Prof. Is the deadline for submission on each deadline 23 hours and 59 minutes?
Somebody from the office, Tabang?
Okay, thanks, Natalie. Yes, that's by the end of that day. That's true, meaning 23:59, yes.
But shouldn't we remind them about Sod's Law? Just that day when you think you're going to be submitting at 10 to 12 at night, something's going to happen and you're not going to have connectivity, or you're going to have load shedding or something like that. Guys, don't leave it till the last minute. Okay, love. We saw what happened tonight. Everything was working and then all of a sudden the technology doesn't work. So don't do that to yourself, okay? You don't want to live in such a risky fashion. So submit earlier in the day. Or, you know what? How about submitting the day before the deadline? That's also okay. A deadline doesn't mean that you have to only submit on that day. You can submit before the deadline. Then you can relax. Then you know yours is in. You don't have to worry about losing connectivity or load shedding.
Okay, thanks, Prof. But what I want to remind the interns of is that they must always remember that when they're submitting, the entry will first go for verification by the tutor. So if they're submitting on the same day, there's no way it will come to us. It's only after the tutor has verified the entry that now it can be submitted for assessment. So submitting on the last day, it won't help them anyway. So the entry won't come to us. So always remember that you must plan your things in advance so that you submit, you allow your tutor enough time to go through your entry so that it can end up being submitted to the office on time. Thank you.
Thanks, Tabang. I'm an academic intern. Can I submit my CPDs this year and write the pre-reg exam next year?
Okay, yes, as long as you are registered as an intern, you can start submitting your CPD entries, and when you are ready for exam, you can still sit for the examination next year, as long as you are still active as an intern in our register. Yes, thank you.
When will applications open for ICSP?
I'm not sure if Kamu is there, but that one depends on the Department of Health. It's not controlled by our office. So once they open, I think they will communicate with them. I'm not sure, Kamu, if she's still here. I think she was in a better position to can answer it better. But remember, placement of community service is done by the Department of Health, not by Pharmacy Council. Thank you.
Okay. Question on Competency Standard 3.6. I want to apply the dates or information from an official mock recall that was done late last year, where I'm currently doing my internship in the manufacturing sector. I cannot physically participate in one this year as it is done every 2 years and exams would have passed. I've already gathered the evidence for destruction and for disposal, behavioral statement A and B. I'm just left with the recall issue, behavioral statement C. I would like to ask if it is possible for me to continue with this activity, provided that I will be assessed by applying guidelines for medicine recalls using a mock recall thereafter, and since I had a training session with the pharmacovigilance pharmacist where she took me through the mock recall, explained the whole process, since it has been 5 years with no medicine recall, and according to behavioral statement C, I'd still be applying the guidelines for the recall of medicines.
Adele, you want to run with that one?
Yes, Prof. For that intern, the problem with not actually doing it is the intern's not able to show how their behavior has changed. I don't know if Prof. Butler would like to add to that, but for a CPD, you have to show us how you actually did something. And I'm not sure that you will be able to, because it's a mock recall that was done just to prepare everyone. You are now looking at the mock recall that was done. So I wouldn't feel comfortable with submitting that, because you are not actually, we can't see that you are actually able to participate in a recall.
I 100% agree with Adele on that one. And that's a good example why that particular one was labeled as challenging. I think if you're looking at domain 3, there's a couple of others, competency standards, that's going to be far easier for you to do. I think you just have to bite the bullet and say 3.6 is not going to work. And I can't see any assessor that's going to be happy accepting a mock situation, because it's all about what did you do? What did you actually do? So, the short answer is no, the mock situation is not going to work.
Thank you. What happens if you have already submitted your CPDs without the evidence being signed? I think I got it mixed up with the tutor verification, thinking that would be enough and won't be a need for my tutor to sign my evidence. Should I now retract my submission?
Okay, if the entry has been submitted for tutor verification, it's possible for the tutor to return it to the intern. But if the entry has already been submitted for assessment, meaning it has passed the tutor, unfortunately, we can't reverse it.
Thanks, Tabang. Must the tutor physically sign on all the evidence for an intern working in a hospital pharmacy, or does this only apply to academic interns?
May I please take that one, Prof? Or Adele?
I might be at odds with some of the assessors here, but I don't think it's necessary for the tutor to physically sign on every piece of evidence. Because you have a situation where you have a tutor just signing. What is more meaningful if you have a little slip of paper where the tutor writes a comment and says, I was well aware, I witnessed all of this, I saw intern Joe Bloggs counseling this patient, and this whole scenario played out as it is described. That is meaningful. Okay. So that kind of a statement is sufficient. If your tutor is going to be signing on each one, then that each one of those signatures will need to be annotated, because there's just a signature. And then it will have to be, the name will have to be printed out, and the P number and the date. The tutor verification was brought in to obviate that activity, but I still think it's a good idea for the tutors to add an overall verification for an entry. And just, a little descriptive note, and also shows that the tutor knew what was going on. But just signing on each piece of evidence doesn't really have any value. And that is what the tutor is doing in the tutor verification process.
Thanks, Prof. Zwango Modal from YouTube, we've just answered your question. Soapy's updates from YouTube. How many CPDs can you submit at a time? We've answered that already. There's no limit. Can you submit all the CPDs at the same time, or is there a limit? Again, there's no limit.
May I just add to that?
Yes, Prof.
While there may be no limit, it's not a good idea. Because to do it that way, if you're doing a whole batch, you are denying yourself the opportunity to look at that assessor feedback and to utilize that feedback to possibly improve your subsequent ones. So it's actually a better idea to maybe do 2 and, but use that assessor feedback because it's a very, very valuable tool. If you're going to just, as late as possible in the year and dump 6 there, you're not going to have any opportunity to learn from the assessor feedback. So while it is possible, it's not a recommended way of doing things.
Thanks, Prof. I was only able to start my internship in March 2022. How will the dates for CPD submission work for someone who started later in the year, and how will this affect the pre-reg exams?
Okay, thanks, Natalie. Yes, the CPD submission deadlines, they don't depend on the date of intern registration. They just apply for the whole year as they are. And then what will determine whether the intern will be able to sit for the exam or not is the period, meaning for how long has that intern been an intern. If he is in the 6-month, yes, they will be able to sit for the exam. If not, it means they will wait for the next exam. And then the requirements, they also apply, wherein we said in the 6-month, you must at least have passed 3 of the 6 CPD entries submitted. But if they are already in their 9-month, by the time they sit for the examination, it means they should have passed all the 6 CPD entries. So yeah, it's like if somebody has registered now in March, it means that person won't meet the requirement to sit for the coming August examination. They can only sit for the October exams, and in that case, the 6 months requirements will apply because they won't be on their 9th month of internship by that time. Thank you.
Thanks, Tabang. The next 2 questions are related. Do all 6 CPDs need to be submitted before the date of the practice exam or before the actual pre-reg exam? And then, do I have to submit any specific amount of CPDs to write the practice exam?
Okay, thanks, Natalie. The practice exam doesn't depend on the CPDs. So everybody can book for the practice exam and sit for the exam with no challenges. Remember, the purpose is just to allow them an opportunity of feeling how the examination will be like, so that by the time they come to sit for the pre-registration examination, they are ready. So they don't need any CPD for the practice exam. And then what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry, Natalie. Natalie?
Sorry, Tabang. Do I have to submit any specific amount of CPDs to write the practice exam?
Okay, no, they don't have to.
Okay, then we have a comment from a tutor. Justice Mukabo says, please emphasize the fact that we as tutor first need to go through the CPDs before. So definitely don't wait till the last day to go through the CPDs. 11:59 out. The last question I have here, will a CPD submitted without evidence being signed be assessed?
Adele, may I please take that one?
Hi, Tabang. Natalie, yes, it will be assessed, and the assessor will have a look at the submission. Remember, it is verified by the tutor. So we know that the tutor has seen it, and then we know that the tutor has approved it. So depending on the evidence, I'm sure it will be assessed, and if the evidence is good, it will be successful.
Thanks, Adele. Another question, can you attend multiple practice exams prior to your 6-month exam?
Okay, yes, I think the interns are allowed to sit for more than one practice exam. The dates are provided there. I think we're still going to have one in June, and if I'm not mistaken, there will be another one towards the end of the year. So yes, they can sit for multiple exams. I mean, practice exams is allowed. Thank you.
Thanks, Tabang. We have no further questions.
All right. In the absence of further questions, I just want to take this opportunity to thank all the presenters and the colleagues from the office for being there and making this workshop possible. And I also thank the interns and the tutors for attending. We hope they have gained a lot from this workshop, and we believe, the quality of the CPDs that we'll be receiving will be proper, and we wish you all the best. And with those few words, I just want to say we've come to the end of the workshop, and I wish you a very good night. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.